NASA's Artemis 1 moon mission is a go for August 29th. By the time this comes out, it has either launched or is on its next launch window, depending on when you're watching this. So, oops, might be late news. If not, who knows? Might be blown up at this point. NASA's Artemis 1 Space Launch System mega rocket stands atop Launch Pad 39B at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, ahead of a planned August 29th, 2022 launch. So basically when this is coming out. The space agency on Monday, August 22nd, cleared its Artemis 1 mission to launch an uncrewed test flight around the moon next week. Tomorrow, liftoff is scheduled to be around 8:33 a.m. Eastern Time. The historic mission, the first of NASA's Artemis program that aims to return astronauts to the moon. While liftoff from Pad 36B at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, it will be the first flight of the Space Launch System mega rocket SLS, NASA's most powerful rocket ever, which is more than the Saturn V, which sent, if you believe they went to the moon, then that's what sent them to the moon. This is more powerful than that. On top of the SLS, they will be doing a critical test of its Orion spacecraft. Quote, "We are go for launch, which is absolutely outstanding," NASA's Associate Administrator Robert Cabana told reporters in a press conference Monday night. This day has been a long time coming. Yeah, it's been about 11 years. Artemis will launch a 322-foot SLS mega rocket and its Orion capsule on a 42-day mission to circle the moon and return to Earth. NASA is billing the test flight as its first mission back to the moon with a crew-capable spacecraft in nearly 50 years. It's also NASA's first new vehicle of its own since the agency retired its space shuttle fleet over a decade ago. According to NASA's plan, Artemis 1 will lift off from Pad 39B, the same launch pad used by Apollo 10 mission to orbit the moon in 1969, as well as Skylab and Apollo-Soyuz missions, and take about a week to reach lunar orbit. It will stay there for about a month before returning to Earth on October 10th. So it's going to be up there for a pretty good amount of time. That assumes everything will go perfectly with the flight. NASA has made it clear that there are possibilities of things going wrong. This is the first flight of a new rocket and new spacecraft. Jim Free, NASA's Associated Administrator of Exploration Systems Development, told reporters, "We're doing something that is incredibly difficult to do and can be very risky." End quote. Missions managers said Monday that they will intend to push the 4-person Orion spacecraft hard, going beyond parameters the agency has set for crewed flights to ensure that the spacecraft gets put through its paces. The mission's marathon 42-day length is longer than the standard 10-day or so Artemis crewed flights NASA has planned. That will give NASA and the European Space Agency, which built the Orion's service module, time to identify any issues to address for the first crewed flight. Orion is also carrying a Moonican mannequin and humanoid torsos covered with sensors to measure the effects of vibration and space radiation on the human body, while 10 small CubeSats will be deployed from the SLS during the flight to test new Artemis exploration technologies. The crew flight is Artemis 2, which NASA hopes to fly in 2024. So this is not crewed. As they said earlier, there's going to be a mannequin in there with a bunch of stuff on it. There's going to be some other scientific stuff in there. There's going to be what's the zero-G gravity, zero-G indicator going to be? I think it's going to be Snoopy maybe. So Artemis 2 is when the crews actually start going up there, like the people. Artemis 3, the first Artemis moon landing with a crew, is targeted for 2025 and will use a SpaceX Starship lander to fly astronauts to one of 13 candidate sites at the moon's south pole. But both of those missions, of course, depend on Artemis 1's turnout. SpaceX, the capsule that's on top of SLS right now that's going to be tested is only to orbit the moon. It's not to land on the moon. What the SpaceX Starship is going to do is take them from orbit, land them on the moon, and then bring them back to orbit. And then presumably they're going to take the Orion spacecraft from the moon's orbit back to Earth. Yes, it's confusing. I'm not going to try to justify why it's confusing because I don't agree with its confusion. It shouldn't be this way. But, the government's very good at contracts and knows how to make them very correct. So this is just another issue with that. But SpaceX is going to be landing people on the moon for Artemis 3. That the whole point of Artemis 3 is to land people on the moon. And the only way that's going to happen is if SpaceX's Starship works and ends up being able to launch. Slight tangent. It does seem like the Starship and booster will be able to at least do a test launch, hopefully this year. The Texas base, I watched the Lob Padre videos every single week. It looks like it's doing pretty good. Hopefully nothing bad happens. There was a slight, I'm pretty sure you call it an explosion, a couple weeks ago, which obviously was probably an issue, but this is a test thing. And considering it took 11 years for the SLS, it took 11 years for the NASA rocket that's about to launch next week. It took them 11 years to do that. And SpaceX has built the prototype that's also supposed to be sending things to the moon. Started the prototype maybe 2 years ago and hasn't even launched the prototype yet. So you can see the differences between how government things are made and private company stuff is made, especially in the space agency, even though most of the things actually built and assembled for the SLS are built by private companies contracted by NASA. So there's some nuance to it, but NASA has 3 chances to launch Artemis 1. It is currently in a flight window which opens on August 29th. The backup days are September 2nd and 5th, with NASA expected to outline its launch strategy later this week, which has already happened. NASA's launch test director, Charlie Blackwell Thompson, said launch crews have 2 final closeout tests to work through, one on the rocket's twin solid boosters, and another connection between the SLS rocket and its mobile launch platform. The teams have done 1 critical test to verify a fix to a leak spotted in June, fueling test. That's why it got rolled back. So, space, baby. Something we should all care about, especially if you don't think we landed on the moon, then this is kind of to the contrary of that, because hopefully we'll be landing on the moon in the next couple of years. Who actually knows if we end up doing it or not? Who knows? But